David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The Donald Trump Republican tax bill will be law before you know it. The House of Representatives voted to pass it. The U.S. Senate has voted to pass it. The House of Representatives then had to do sort of a procedural revote because of some minor, almost like clerical changes to the Senate version. And of course, the House and Senate both have to sign the exact same legislation, and Donald Trump is expected to sign it maybe today, very soon. I don't know how soon, but it's going to happen pretty quickly. So it is happening. It is a disaster. And we will do a full analysis of the final bill and its provisions tomorrow, because throughout this entire process, what's actually in the bill has been a bit of a mystery, even as we found out yesterday to some of the people signing the bill who decided that they were in favor of the bill, even without total familiarity with what was in it. And what's been interesting to see is how the closer the bill has gotten to becoming the law, the more opposition there has been from the American public, which is different because usually the American public likes, quote, tax cuts. As a general thing, when you cut people's taxes, people tend to like it, even though, yeah, some people have questions and concerns about the economic viability of it. But this is not the case in this particular instance. And I'm going to give you the polling number in a moment. And part of what's going on here is that the public does not believe it is actually a tax cut for them being most people, not corporations and the very, very rich. Most people didn't want this bill to pass. And I would even say that if more people understood the bill and understood what the bill does, the numbers would be even more lopsided in opposition to the bill. So we have this new CNN poll conducted by SSRS, and it shows that opposition to the bill is up 10 percentage points since the start of November. 55% of the country now opposes the bill. Also from this poll, 2/3 of the country believes that the bill does more to benefit the wealthy. Well, yeah, that's true. That's an accurate assessment from 2/3 of the people in this country. 37% of the country believes that their family will be worse off under the bill. If by paying higher taxes you're worse off, then that's at least 37%. Really, over the long term, more than half of all Americans will pay more taxes under this plan. 63% of the country believes that Trump and his family will personally be better off under the bill. That's true. The fact that only 63% thinks that tells us a lot of people don't really know what's in the bill. 73% say that Trump should release his tax returns to the public. I agree. And we are not going to see those probably ever, I would say, at this point. Not going to happen. 89% of Democrats oppose the bill. 76% of Republicans support the bill. So a huge split between Democrats and Republicans here. But there's no doubt that big picture overall, in the balance, in the net, opposition to this bill has grown over time. And that tells us a lot about why they've been so eager to pass this thing so quickly, even without reading it themselves in the House and Senate. Pass it before public outcry grows even more. Pass it before Doug Jones is seated in the Senate, although in this case, a straight party line vote, they would have actually been able to pass it anyway after Doug Jones was seated.
That's true, yeah. And maybe it's an appeal to popularity to say that this bill is unpopular, therefore it's bad policy. But we live in a government that's supposed to represent the people, right? And all the people, not just the rich and the corporations.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's telling here.
I'm not saying that it's a bad bill because people are opposed to it, although I believe that a lot of people are opposed to it because it is a bad bill.
Yes.
But what I am saying is that if we have a representative democracy here, why wouldn't the will of the people be reflected in how our elected officials are voting? So that's a good distinction and point that Pat is making here. So we've got to realize that, bottom line, the desires of the people are not being reflected in our government at every level. To go back a few months, at the election level, right? Millions more people voted for Hillary Clinton than for Donald Trump. Yet Donald Trump is president due to the Electoral College. Does that reflect the will of the people, or does it reflect the system that's designed in a very particular way, a system that can be taken advantage of? Most Americans are in favor of net neutrality, yet it was repealed. Americans overall believe climate change is real and caused by humans, but the White House has made the United States the one country that is not going to participate in the Paris Climate Accord. So there's this very, very long list, and opposition to this tax bill is now part of that as well. It's truly sad, and there's only one path forward. Pat, I'm sure you know what I'm going to say. I've been saying it for weeks now.
What is that?
Vote them out. Vote them out. We have to vote them out. That is the only path forward, because they are not even doing your will. If the American people wanted this stuff, I would disagree with it, but at least I'd say it reflects the will of the people. None of this reflects the will of the people. I've been waiting to talk about this next story because there's been a lot of misinformation about it. A few days ago, the Washington Post published a story saying that the CDC has issued a directive to policy analysts telling them you cannot use certain words in documents related to the budget and supporting materials for the budget that are going to be given to Congress. There is actually, we'll put up a quote for you from the Washington Post article. They reported policy analysts at the CDC in Atlanta were told of the list of forbidden words at a meeting Thursday with senior CDC officials who oversee the budget, according to an analyst who took part in the 90-minute briefing. At the CDC, the meeting about the banned words was led by Allison Kelly, a senior leader in the agency's Office of Financial Services, according to the CDC analyst, who spoke on the condition of anonymity because the person was not authorized to speak publicly. Kelly did not say why the words are being banned, according to the analyst, and told the group that she was merely relaying the information. Other CDC officials confirmed the existence of a list of forbidden words. It's likely that other parts of Health and Human Services are operating under the same guidelines regarding the use of these words, the analyst said. The words supposedly banned were vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. And the story that grew and circulated was that these words were banned at the CDC at the direction of the Trump administration. And people have been flooding me with messages and emails and tweets saying, David, why won't you cover the story of this authoritarian, Orwellian, dystopian ban of certain words at the CDC as a result of the Trump administration? Now, it's true that the current administration is very authoritarian, but this particular story, based on the latest information we have, is just not true. It appears to have been, I guess we're going to call it a miscommunication, although I'm not exactly sure whether that's the right word. What we have are the following statements on record. December 17th, the CDC director, Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, tweeted that no words are banned. She tweeted, I want to assure you there are no banned words at CDC. We will continue to talk about all our important public health programs. The same Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald followed up with Snopes via email, where she said, quote, I understand that confusion arose from a staff-level discussion at a routine meeting about how to present CDC's budget. It was never intended as overall guidance for how we describe and conduct CDC's work. For more than 70 years, CDC has pledged to the American people that we will treat all persons with dignity, honesty, and respect. We take this pledge as seriously today as we did when it was written. So where did this come from? What I believe happened here is that the CDC had a discussion where it was mentioned that from a practical perspective, because of the political biases of the current administration, Congress, the White House, etc., they explored the undeniable reality that it would probably be better to secure passage of the CDC budget to avoid certain words or phrases, or generally to use language that will not raise eyebrows with the current administration. That's still very concerning, okay? I'm not defending that that's what's being done. If you have a science organization, a medical organization, that has to self-police their language, even if it's their idea, right? That's what self-policing is, because they realize if we word our budget in a certain way, the current administration might give us grief about passing the budget. That's a disaster and a problem. But that's not the same story, Pat, as the Trump administration has banned the CDC from using these 7 words.
Right, but it will undoubtedly affect scientists and the topics they choose to research, right?
Absolutely.
Because the word fetus is banned, they're not going to look into abortion. If the word transgender is banned, they're not going to look into LGBT issues.
Maybe. I mean, there's a more benign interpretation, which is, well, they'll just use much more general language about what they're using money for in the
You
budget.
can avoid it, yeah.
But then they'll still do all those exact same things. So this is a really concerning development. But the development is not that the Trump administration has issued some kind of a capricious dictate about language to be used and not used, which would be absolutely disastrous. But it's still bad because we have science and medical organizations within the government that are regulating their language, not based on using language that most accurately depicts and reflects their work, but because they don't want to raise the ire of the administration. And that's a really big problem, but we need to report it accurately.
And I do think that you can take the CDC director's word over maybe even the Washington Post on this one, and that's probably a hit for them.
That's the only other counterpoint to this that I've seen a little bit, which is you can't believe the CDC because they're in cahoots with Trump. Everything we've seen so far suggests that the CDC is really holding their own against Trump, by and large. I'm open to having my mind changed, but I'm not ready to say we can't believe the CDC. I think the CDC is one of the agencies, actually, that has sort of resisted going in the anti-science direction of Trump. So if you were wondering why I hadn't covered the story of the banned words, it's because all the indications are that there is no such story, but this is the story as we understand it right now. If I'm wrong, send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Adam Cooper. This is viewer and listener supported programming. Be like Adam. Support the program through a membership at davidpakman.com/membership. The coupon code, it's ending soon because the year is ending. I voted 17 is the coupon code. You can also make a pledge of as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. And lastly, calendars, 2018 David Pakman Show calendars available for free at davidpakman.com/calendar with a new yearly membership. It is time for the last Hatriot Mail of 2017, happening amidst some dude jackhammering outside of our studio. Apparently this is the right time to do construction in the street, but we will persevere with the last Hatriot Mail of the year.
It's like a mandatory transvaginal ultrasound for your mind. Patriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
All right, a lot of madness in this one. The last Hatriot Mail of the year. Take a listen.
David, go sit in a corner and start crying because your Vizios is a disgrace towards science, honesty, truth, and decency. You are so far off the mark, it is mind-boggling. You are obtuse in a way I almost cannot describe. I made many amateur, but accurate, I think, videos myself. I did 4 to 5 videos about proving David Pakman wrong specifically. My favorite Jew, Mr. Pakman. Watch out, as he'll take it all as of you away.
That's exactly right. I will take is all as of you away ASAP and quickly. What a year of Hatriot Mail, right?
I love this one. I
Yeah.
mean, he went 0 for 3 on the spelling of the word videos.
Yes.
He had Vizios, and then he added apostrophes, too. Those
Oh, yeah.
still belong there.
I actually sometimes will do a double apostrophe when I write the word videos because I'm just crazy like that. Thank you for the 1 year, a really great year of Hatriots. Remember that you can turn Hatriot Mail into something positive by using the coupon code Hatriot40 when you sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You'll save 40%, and another Hatriot will cry in a basement somewhere on their computer while
Making
sitting on
amateur
a bed,
videos about you.
making amateur videos debunking me. At this point, I'm almost sick of explaining over and over again that tax cuts for the rich don't stimulate the economy and that tax cuts for businesses don't trigger hiring or help the economy. The CEOs mostly get this as well. Remember when White House Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn was at that Wall Street Journal event, and he said, how many CEOs here are going to invest more and hire people if the tax bill passes? And almost nobody raised their hands. And now we have yet another CEO who admits that, yeah, even if the tax plan passes, which it has, and the corporate tax rate is reduced from 35 to 21%, that Wells Fargo in this case is not going to hire anybody else. This is according to their CEO, Tim Sloan, from an interview with CNN, who said, is it our goal to increase return to our shareholders? And do we have an excess amount of capital? The answer to both is yes. So our expectation should be that we will continue to increase our dividend and our share buybacks next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. He's telling us they're going to do two things: increase the return to shareholders, not employees, by increasing dividends, and by buying back their own stock with the extra money, which is going to further raise the price of that stock, growing income inequality. And the logic is really simple. Corporate taxes to a business are sort of the cost of making profits. If you make $100,000 in profit and the tax rate is 35%, you pay $35,000. If the tax rate is 21%, you pay $21,000. Investment in your own business is tax deductible, meaning you already don't pay taxes on it. So if you have a high tax rate, you avoid 35% in taxes by investing in the business, since it reduces your profit and it's actually good for the economy. You might hire people if there was excess demand. You might buy more equipment if there was excess demand, which supports other businesses. If the tax rate is lower, you avoid less taxes by investing in the business. It is a disincentive to invest in the business if you can pull profits out and pay a lower tax rate. And aside from the math of it, businesses hire people when there's demand. If so many people want your product that you can't keep up with demand, you hire more staff to make your product. What causes people to demand your product? Well, one requirement is they've got to have the money for it, right? And cutting the tax rate on corporations doesn't give people more money for your product. It gives shareholders money, and it gives rich people money who already can afford your product. The idea that corporate tax cuts stimulate the economy is laughable to any thinking individual. And there's a pretty good case to be made that corporate tax cuts, when the effective tax rate is so low as it is in the United States, can actually be bad for the economy. And the CEOs are admitting it. Economists know it. Trickle-down economics doesn't work. But good luck explaining it to Trump. He doesn't know what trickle-down is to begin with.
And bad CEO, honestly. I mean, he has a fiduciary responsibility to deliver a profit to his shareholders, right?
Yes.
So maybe he should have just lied, apparently.
Well, no, he's admitting that he's going to deliver that to his shareholders. He's actually saying, no, what this is going to be used for is just growing the profit delivered to shareholders. We're not going to do what it is that Trump and Republicans are claiming we're going to do. And it's interesting that he's actually being honest. Partially, yes, it's because he doesn't want to make hiring promises that then he might not actually be able to follow through on. That's number one.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, he doesn't want to be pointed to as one of the reasons that the tax bill passed if it ends up not being so good for the company because they end up having fewer customers who can afford their product or service. Absolute disaster. And I'm glad that at least it's kind of getting out there and becoming a discussion, because it's too easy just to repeat that talking point. Lower corporate taxes are good for the economy. Explain to me how. And that's actually something I plan to talk with Dilbert creator Scott Adams about in the interview, which will start part 1 right after this break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I am joined today by Scott Adams, the creator of the world-famous Dilbert comic strip, which I've been reading shockingly since I was 11 years old. Also author of many, many books, a lot of which I've read. And in what kind of bums me out, I think a Trump supporter. And we're going to talk to him about whether he believes Trump is a great influencer or believes in the Trump agenda or the Trump message, et cetera. Thanks for doing this, by the way. I know that we maybe started off rockily on Twitter with me criticizing your report card, which we'll get to, but I appreciate you being willing to have a conversation about it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's sort of start at the beginning. Your politics, aside from Trump, do you characterize yourself as a left or right winger, libertarian, authoritarian? What are your personal politics?
I've been calling myself an ultra left. In other words, ultra liberal left of Bernie. And what I mean by that is I like a lot of the stuff he likes. For example, I like free college. I like health care for everybody. But Bernie didn't have a practical plan to get there. I think we should make a practical plan, and it probably has something to do with changing our systems and using technology and focusing on startups that can lower costs and that sort of thing. But where I want to go is good for everyone. I'd like to get the same things Bernie wants, but I don't think he had a plan to get there.
So, like, for example, on economic justice as one issue and taxation, since we're dealing today with the passage of this new tax bill, would I be correct to presume that if you are with Bernie or to the left of Bernie, that this is a tax plan that you don't see as a good tax plan for the country?
Yeah, I'm not in support of the tax plan. I would have just left it very similar to how it was and just dropped some of the tax rates for the people in the middle. You probably did have to do something for the corporate tax rates just to be competitive. I think that argument is sound economically, and in the long run, that's going to be good for everybody if the corporations are doing well, even if that feels a little distasteful.
Yeah, well,
So,
I actually, in part two of the interview, we'll dig into that specific part because I know that plays into your economy grade for Donald Trump's report card of his first year. So historically, what political candidates have you tended to vote for and support?
Well, my most recent, as in the last several elections, philosophy is to not vote. And the reason I do that is because as a student of persuasion, which I assume we'll be talking about in more detail, I've learned that as soon as you join a team, you sacrifice all objectivity. Now, you may not do that intentionally, but the normal way a human being is wired is that the moment you say, I'm on this team, you start defining everything your team does as wonderful and right, and everything the other team does as stupid and evil. And it's sort of automatic. So as soon as you vote for somebody or join a team, and I'm neither a Democrat nor Republican, I don't think I'm registered at this point, it gives you at least a chance of objectivity, even though there's a lot more to it. But it's
it's interesting you mentioned that because that's exactly what I think is a criticism of what happened to Donald Trump. In other words, growing up, he was relatively apolitical in some sense, but I guess putatively a Democrat, and he donated to people on both sides of the aisle. He decided, I believe, because he only had a chance of winning the Republican primary, never would have won the Democratic primary. Now he's a Republican good, Democrat bad. Isn't the reason that you have not voted historically a really good criticism of the problem of what we've seen with Trump since he has declared, I am a Republican?
Could you say more about that? Are you saying that he's embraced too much Republican philosophy? Is that your point?
I think he has no idea about Republican philosophy. If he did, that I would actually respect that more. What he's embraced is just what Republicans tell him is good is what's good, and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are terrible people. Anything that they've proposed historically is bad. Democrats are bad, Republicans are good, when really that's not been his lifelong philosophy. It seems he has fallen victim to exactly what you're pointing out, which is once he joined the team, he lost all objectivity.
I think it would be hard to say that. One of the things I always caution against is mind reading strangers. So what you're suggesting would imagine that you have some insight into his inner thoughts.
No, not necessarily. I'm just saying from his public statements, it's everything Democrats do and have done and propose is bad. And he's a Republican, and we need Doug Jones to lose because we need the seat with no regard to what that actually means. That's what I mean.
Yeah, let me make a distinction between what a politician believes in their inner thoughts versus how they act, because you have to act a certain way to get a certain result.
Okay.
So I think it's hard to distinguish how much of President Trump, or indeed any politician, how much of what they say is to get the effect and how much is what they really believe deeply on the inside. Now, I have a little more faith in someone who has ever changed sides. So, for example, the fact that he was once a Democrat but now a Republican gives me a little hope that he's at least had some appreciation for both sides. Likewise, when I look at the lawyers on TV talking about the Russia collusion and whether there's something there or not something there, I put far more credibility in Alan Dershowitz because he was a Clinton supporter who doesn't see a crime, at least one committed by Trump. So I feel a little more comfortable. You can't be 100% comfortable with anybody else's objectivity, but whenever you see somebody cross a line like that, that should give you a little bit of hope.
Strictly speaking, though, that's a logically fallacious way to assess the believability of a claim, though, right? The fact that someone has revised a claim says nothing whatsoever about the truth of the claim. I mean, someone who at one point believed that climate change was caused by humans now has been influenced by the so-called skeptic community and no longer believes it. Merely the fact that someone has held two opinions and believes that they've come to the eventual correct assessment from a strictly speaking logical standpoint tells us nothing about the truth of their belief.
That's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
It only tells you that they may be the type of person who is capable of changing an opinion, which is actually special in its own way, because you can see online on Twitter, people won't change their opinion because the facts changed.
Sure.
It's a rare situation.
Yeah,
So
Daniel Kahneman's work on this subject and Dan Ariely, both very, very, very interesting in terms of people becoming further entrenched in their beliefs, actually.
Right.
So let's get to your thoughts about Trump. I mean, I know that ultimately, I think you at different points endorsed like 4 different people in the last election. And Hillary Clinton, you said you did because you were getting death threats after not endorsing her. Is that right?
Well, I had not. In the beginning, I didn't endorse anyone.
Yep.
I was just trying to be as objective as possible. But I was writing about President Trump's powers of persuasion, not his politics, but his ability to persuade and the tools he was using, based on my background as a trained hypnotist for anybody who's following this and doesn't know my background.
Yeah.
But that was enough of an endorsement in other people's eyes to say, okay, you're just a Trump supporter. That wasn't exactly the case in my case, but it was close enough that people said, okay, you're on that side. Once they said that, and once the Democrats had built a good persuasion case that Trump was not just a candidate they didn't like, but actually the second coming of some kind of a Hitler, Nazi type of personality, that gave people moral cover to kill him and to kill me. And I mean that literally. Because if you think somebody is, well, he reminds me of Hitler, that's not permission to kill him. But if you say he is Hitler,
Sure.
like he's actually going to do the things Hitler does, he's going to round up brown people, because that's the sort of talk you were hearing. So under that condition, you do have moral permission to murder, actually literally murder somebody who is actually Hitler. Because if an actual Hitler was coming up and you as a citizen had a chance to take him out, well, you ought to do it, right?
Okay, so you're sort
Now-
of naming some hyperbolic statements that would not get you to oppose Trump. But what eventually I would like to get to, and you mentioned the persuasion aspect, in reading a lot of what you've written about your feelings about Trump, it definitely seems that you are sort of impressed with Donald Trump's persuasion skills as you describe them. But I'm curious why you think that that's of value in and of itself.
Well, tools have to be evaluated as tools. So when I look at my toolbox and see the hammer, it might be a really good hammer for pounding a nail, but that doesn't mean I need to pound a nail. It doesn't mean that a nail needs to be in anything. It just means that it's a good tool. So the tools that the president uses are the same tools that we citizens can use in our daily life to also to good effect if we're good people and bad effect if we're bad people. That's how tools work. And so I thought it was important for people to understand the president in terms of the tools he had, because they were the ones he would bring to the job if elected. And that would be the most predictive element of everything you're seeing is the power of those persuasive tools. So I thought people needed to know that, and I thought people would be, or I hoped, people would be adult enough to understand that you can compartmentalize a complicated person and say, well, he is doing this part right, and well, even if you don't like all these other parts.
Yeah, and I think we actually have some agreement on this. I see it as Donald Trump was able to bamboozle a significant portion of the population with, for example, populist rhetoric, even though, as we see from the tax bill, that he's governing in quite a different way, talking about, I'm going to keep you safe with this wall that Mexico is going to pay for. Who's even talking about that anymore? I mean, it was laughable to even believe it would happen when he was talking about it, that it's deep in the rearview mirror at this point. So I don't know if I agree with you that he was able to persuade people. And now the more governance time we get, the more I'm convinced that it was a bamboozling of people into making them think that he would do things he never really had an intention of doing. What do you think?
Let me ask you a definition.
Yeah.
How do you define the difference between leadership and bamboozling? How do you make that distinction?
I don't know that there are two terms that are sort of I don't know why it's those two terms. I see them as two totally unrelated things. Bamboozling is sort of like a scamming people, making them think you're going to do A, but you're doing B. Leadership is leading. I don't know.
No, but it's the same set of tools. You're persuading somebody to go in a certain direction. I would submit that the difference between leadership that you like and bamboozling that you don't is whether you think it's heading in the right direction.
No,
So, for
I don't think so.
example-
Let me tell you why I don't think so.
Okay.
If Donald Trump had proposed a set of policy ideas that I disagreed with and then carried them out, that wouldn't be bamboozling. I would still disagree with it, but it's not bamboozling merely because I don't agree with it. So I reject that idea. I think the bamboozling is that he promised one thing and is doing another, that he framed himself as this populist who's going to do all these things that will be great for the average person, and yet most of those things either haven't been done or he's no longer even interested in doing them.
Well, you would agree that in the case of the wall, just his talking tough about immigration has probably lowered the rate of people wanting to immigrate. In other words, immigration is lower. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would agree that for many years, more people have been leaving the U.S. to go back to Mexico than coming in. But that's a trend that precedes Trump. Deportations are actually down under Trump compared to Obama. So if you have a metric to point to, I'd be curious to hear it. But every metric I've seen is that we've got a net outflow to Mexico for years and that deportations are down under Trump.
No, I agree that we've had a net outflow for years, but we've also had a greater reduction in immigration since the election. That's what the news is reporting. Is that wrong?
When you say the news is reporting, I immediately am skeptical because I want to be as critical a reader of the news as possible. If you had specific data, we could talk about it. I think neither one of us necessarily has it in front of us.
Well, let's make that a fact check for the audience.
Absolutely.
I believe that both sides, and I think we'd agree there are two sides of the media, right? There's the conservative and the liberal side. I believe both sides are reporting a big decrease in immigration that they do tie to about Election Day. That there seemed to be a change about that.
Okay.
Now
that aside,
so
though, I mean, big picture, I know that the persuasion skills of Trump have been a big element in your being sort of impressed with him. But in terms of the governance, and without getting into the micro, which we'll do in part two, how do you think he's doing as a leader of the United States?
He's what I call a pricey president. And by that, I mean, in order to get the good stuff, you're going to have to pay. And you may not be paying in money. So one of the things that is definitely on the negative side is racial feelings. So I would say that one of the things that is a cost of the Trump presidency is that we have worse feelings about race than we really need to. You know, the world events don't really support how badly people are feeling about race at the moment. And a lot of that, maybe all of it, is on him directly. So I give him an F grade for racial happiness.
Yeah, we agree.
Now he might be able to improve that, and I think he will. And I've been working specifically with Black Lives Matter of New York to see if I can, help make some change happen there. That's a separate story. Yeah. Now, but if you're to look at other elements, he seems to do them unusually well. So, for example, I think that dealing with North Korea, it's sort of too early to say, but it's very likely that his style will be unusually effective because he's a little bit scarier, he's a little bit less predictable, and he'll probably take things further than other people would take them. And he's also made friends with the people that maybe traditionally we weren't so friendly with, Putin and
I'll say.
And Xi in China. A slightly different situation there. Yeah. But he seems to be on good terms with them because he's made an expensive decision, apparently. All right. I'm not trying to mind read it, just based on what we see. Apparently, he's taking the expense of being friends with dictators or powerful people of, let's say, adversarial countries.
Some of them certainly dictators.
Yeah, and in order to deal with this, what he would consider a larger priority, in this case, North Korea. So if you're asking me, is it expensive to have a President Trump? I would say, oh yeah, it's going to cost you. This doesn't come free. He's got some rough edges, and nobody thinks he doesn't need to deal with them. But the big stuff, like the economy, North Korea, dealing with ISIS, he seems to be nailing the big stuff, even if you allow that President Obama gave us, and I do allow this, that he gave us a strong base. So in other words, the economy was doing well. I believe 75% of what we've seen this past year is really an Obama economy just carried over. And by the way, I think Obama did a great job of taking us back from the brink of financial disaster when he first came into office. He was the right personality for that kind of situation. But now we have a good economy and the right kind of personality to take it to an even greater level is the super optimist, the person who can talk the economy up. So those same things that you call bamboozling and maybe people call a con man, and I would call leadership if it's heading in the right direction. He is doing directly for the economy, which is largely a psychology engine. So if you don't have shortages, which would describe 2017, we didn't have shortages of really anything. It's how you feel about the economy that makes you invest or not, hire or not, and he's operating directly on that level of our psychology. And you can see that all the metrics that speak to the psychology of the economy are just off the charts now.
All right. Well, on that note, I think that's a good place for us to pause, and we'll jump directly in part 2 of the interview into the meat of the report card, including the economy and other factors. We're speaking with Scott Adams, the creator of the world famous Dilbert comic strip. We will be back with part 2.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We recently did the story about Trish Regan, who's a host on Fox Business Network, and she has been clearly opposed to the Donald Trump tax bill that recently passed. And more broadly, we've talked before about the occasional voices of reason on Fox News, Shepard Smith and sometimes Chris Wallace. And the big picture line on Fox News has been that there's nothing to the Russia investigation. They pretend that there is nothing there beyond a partisan witch hunt by Republican Robert Mueller against Republican Donald Trump, I guess, is what they want us to believe. Sean Hannity, totally in the tank against Mueller. That wacky judge, Jeanine Pirro, straight up off her rocker, recently said there's a criminal cabal in the FBI that is this investigation. The problem isn't the Trump campaign or the administration. It's the fact that Robert Mueller is investigating them. And then we have others like Lou Dobbs and Greg Jarrett on Fox and Fox Business who work really hard. I mean, they're really putting in a day's work to try to discredit the entire investigation and pretend that just nothing is going on. So this morning I saw a headline saying 2 Fox News hosts slam their own network's coverage of Trump Russia. And I knew right away, one of them has to be Shepard Smith. And it was. Shepard Smith recently interviewed Fox News resident judge Andrew Napolitano, who very often is also completely off his rocker. But Napolitano told it like it is. Shepard Smith set him up to do it. And straight up, he said, listen, Kushner is in the line of fire in this investigation. Trump Jr. is in the line of fire. And Trump himself is in the line of fire. And our colleagues at Fox aren't being upfront. Take a listen, take a look at this video.
We know what's public, but we don't have a real idea of what the 17 attorneys working for Robert Mueller have
Right.
learned, have confirmed.
We do not, but we know that the advice that the president's lawyers gave him in August, that this will be over by Thanksgiving, is absolutely untrue. Here it is Christmas, and it's ratcheting up. We also know that there have been no denials to the Washington Post reports this morning that this is likely to go through 2018. And we also know that Bob Mueller and team are meeting with the president's lawyers at the end of this week. We don't know what they're going to say.
Who, based on the evidence, based on what's happened, who's in the line of fire now? Jared Kushner?
Jared Kushner's in the line of fire. Donald Trump Jr. is in the line of fire. And, of course, the president's in the line of fire. We don't know what Bob Mueller has. I am critical of a lot of our colleagues who say there's no there there. You know what, Shep? This is a jigsaw puzzle with 100,000 pieces. And we see a piece here and a piece there, and everybody says, it doesn't make any sense. They're not connected. It takes time to amass all these evidence, all these pieces of evidence, so that we see the jigsaw puzzle completed. And that's what Mueller and company are trying to do.
Indictments and confessions
Yes.
we've had thus far.
Yes. Look, General Flynn was exposed to 60 years in jail. If he had been convicted of every charge that was out there and he'd been sentenced to the max, he's now exposed to 6 months. How did he go from 60 years down to 6 months? He must have given them something. We won't find out what that is until we get to that point in the investigation.
But they know.
Bob Mueller knows. We don't. Yeah.
Judge, it's nice to see you.
Oh, pleasure.
None of this is controversial, right? The only controversial part is that you don't hear this on Fox News. But this is just a basic, sober legal analysis here. It's clear that Kushner and Trump Jr. are in the line of fire. By definition, this goes up to and possibly includes the president of the United States, depending on what they find. The truth on Fox News is in a way more powerful because it's just a never-ending canyon of BS. The problem is that because of how the news cycle works, I don't even know how effective it'll be on their own viewers. Uranium One is one example, and we talked about this, Pat. On Fox News, you heard widespread promotion, uncritical promotion of the Uranium One conspiracy theory for weeks, and their viewers bought it hook, line, and sinker. And then weeks in, Shepard Smith does one segment, really good segment, one segment debunking the entire thing in about 5 minutes. But by then, too much of their audience, the people that need to see it, already believe the conspiracy theory. So they see Shep and half of them write it off because Shep's gay and he can't be trusted as the gay liberal on Fox News. But I think sometimes it's almost too late because they're at this point preaching to the converted already, but the converted not to their religion, so to speak.
Well, maybe the Fox News viewers will see their network as more credible, right? Because then they can point to people like Sean Hannity and Judge Jeanine Pirro on the right, and then they have Shepard Smith and Andrew Napolitano on the left. So there's a whole diversity of opinions there.
Yeah,
right?
but they'll still only believe what they hear from the Hannity and the Pirro and whoever else.
But they'll see Fox News as a credible source.
Oh, yeah.
And that's dangerous.
That is dangerous. Anything that makes them actually believe that Fox News is fair and balanced, which, by the way, they're no longer using that slogan. In terms of, just to touch on one of the things Napolitano mentioned, how long the investigation will last. Remember that the goalposts are now in the parking lot. It was first going to wrap up within months of Trump's inauguration. Then it was going to wrap up by Thanksgiving. Then it was going to be done by the end of 2017. And at this point, I cannot imagine that it ends during 2018. And based on what we hear publicly about where Mueller is, it seems to me that this is getting started still, not wrapping up. And we'll see how long it ultimately lasts. Net neutrality was repealed last week. We now have impending price increases announced by at least 3 major internet service providers. We've got Comcast, Cox, and Frontier, all upping various rates for 2018. Now, to be clear, these internet service providers up their rates all the time. I'm not saying they are doing this because of the repeal of net neutrality, But this is now something they will have even more freedom to do. We've got Comcast that has launched Instant TV. It's a TV streaming service. They're going to have a new $3 to $3.50 per month fee added to it. They're going to increase modem rental fees by 10%. Missed payment fees will go from 50 cents to $10. Then you've got Cox Cable. They're going to up most of their monthly internet plans between $2 and $4 a month. And that's, of course, separate from the price increases on their cable TV plans. And then you've got Frontier Communications, which is adding a completely arbitrary and sketchy $2 internet infrastructure surcharge to most accounts, including the promotional deals. And that's how they do a lot of these pseudo scams, where they quote you a really low price, like the sticker price, $29.99 a month, but then they shift a ton of the money they collect from you into the fees that they mix in with the taxes there. And this is a really, really common thing. So let's think this through. Is this because of net neutrality? Well, no. I mean, these companies raise rates all the time. The problems here are numerous, though. Number one is that, of course, now these increases that we deal with every year are going to be allowed to escalate and become even more expensive. The possibility of tiered internet plans, internet fast lanes and slow lanes, as we've talked about. Second is the deceptive advertising of the low sticker price, which I mentioned, and then backloading all the fees. And then number three is that entire scam that is technology fees and infrastructure fees. The way digital technology is supposed to work over time is that the technology costs decrease. Bandwidth over time becomes cheaper. Data storage over time becomes cheaper. As more customers get internet, the distribution cost per customer goes down. These fees exist in part because of the market power that these companies have, because they are effectively legal monopolies. My service just went up. I called in. They offer me a savings of $10 a month if I'm willing to slow down my internet to half of its speed. By the way, my internet's already slow.
And how is the customer service, too?
Oh, it's atrocious.
Yeah.
It's absolutely atrocious. In New York City, this is not a victory of any kind. It's not a progressive panacea. But there was a little bit of competition in Manhattan. So in our Manhattan studio, we had Verizon Fios fiber optic service for $85 a month. It was a 100 megabit down, 50 megabit up. Really great. We were able to upload our big 2 gigabyte daily show file in like 10 minutes. Okay.
Oh, wow.
In Boston, we have Comcast. Recently went up from $165 a month to $215 a month for a 20 megabit upload line. That's the fastest that we can get, unless we want Comcast to put in a fiber line for us, which would still only be a 20 megabit upload, but it would be more stable as the sales pitch goes. And that would cost $700 per month. No, thank you. And this is not praise for Verizon. It's just the reality that as soon as you get some competition, you do start to see better options at lower prices, and it is going to get much worse before it gets better. Hey, there's a pretty big feud developing between the Eggman and Troy York. Here's a voicemail that the Eggman left at 219-2-David P. since yesterday's show.
Dave, I'm so torn. Troy York's message was so idiotic, yet it's so great that he knows that your economics professor was Richard Wolff, whom I love also.
Sure.
Dave, I don't know what to think about Troy York. I mean, the dude hates you, but he's obsessed with you.
Yeah.
I just want to know which one of us is going to get an invitation to the wedding, me or him.
Right.
All right, shalom.
Good one.
And please don't
Yeah.
sit me at his table if it's both of us. Yo.
If they're both invited to my hypothetical wedding that doesn't exist right now, I will not seat them together. That's a pledge I can make. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Troy York. He calls in with like 5 different personas, and it's always criticisms of the show and everything. But the guy clearly is a devoted listener and viewer because he knows everything that's happening on the program, and we appreciate all of our audience, whether or not you agree with me politically.
Well, it's just upsetting to me because Troy York and the Eggman, they're regular callers.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see them beefing.
I would rather see them get along. That would be
Right.
my desire, but I think it is more interesting for them to be feuding. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We're going to talk about Neil Gorsuch. We will talk about weather forecasting, and we will talk about a mission to Alpha Centauri. Centauri. How do you pronounce
Centauri?
that? Centauri? Alpha Centauri in 2069. Get the bonus show as a patron at patreon.com/DavidPakman Show or as a member at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.